Hello and welcome to UK Paranormal Files. Crop circles are a phenomenon that have been appearing around the world for a number of centuries, and for much of that time their discovery was rare and their cause usually attributed to unusual weather patterns. From the 1970s onwards, the frequency of crop formations appearing increased exponentially, particularly in England, and the complexity of the designs and intricacies of the patterns has steadily evolved over time. With the increased modern supply of circles came with it increased speculation and theories as to who or what was creating them, with a number of devotees believing that these were, and indeed are, communications from extraterrestrials, and in the deciphering of the formations we can reveal messages intended to guide humanity, or perhaps warn us of dangers which lie ahead. For the most part, modern crop formations have been proven to be man-made, and a number of individuals have even come forward and confirmed their involvement in their creation. It is now generally accepted that crop formations are man-made, and the absence of any evidence to the contrary has in the last decade or two rendered these theories of an extraterrestrial source to the fringes of paranormal and UFO theory. There was, however, a set of crop formations that appeared in the early 2000s which were very different to the formations that came before them and also ever since. These formations were different not just by their designs, but also because, unlike so many other crop formations, these seem to convey a set of very specific messages. Known by various names such as the Chilbolton formations or as the Arecibo reply, in this episode we shall take a look at those formations and examine what information these formations were seemingly attempting to relay and who or what was the source. To understand these crop formations, we must first start by going back a little further in time to the 1960s. A massive radio telescope was constructed at Arecibo in Puerto Rico. You will likely be familiar with its iconic image, as it has featured in numerous films and television documentaries. The telescope is useful in numerous fields of research, but it is perhaps most famous for its role in the SETI program, or the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The SETI program was primarily focused on listening out for radio signals being transmitted from somewhere out in the cosmos. The theory was that if there is intelligent life out there in the universe, at some point in their development, they would have likely developed the ability to transmit information via radio signals, much like we are doing here on Earth. It was theorised and hoped that by monitoring the night sky, we may pick up on some of these alien broadcasts. Much upgrade work was performed on the telescope in the year 1974, and it was decided that for the reopening, the administrators wanted something big to capture the attention and imagination of the public. Their work there, after all, was almost entirely funded by the public purse. It was decided that instead of just listening for signals from outer space, maybe the time was right for the project to transmit a message to possible ETs. Carl Sagan and Frank Drake had recently collaborated on a similar project in creating the Pioneer plaques for Voyagers 10 and 11. These pictorial messages were added to the spacecraft to identify the origin of the craft to any extraterrestrials that might encounter them. In composing a message, it was understood that it would have to be clear, simple, and easily interpreted by beings which might not have any concept of spoken language, let alone being able to understand any of the languages used here on Earth. A similar initiative was commissioned of the two gentlemen by the SETI Institute, but the challenge here was greater. How do you transmit pictorial information using radio signals and present it so that when the message was received by a far-off planet, its inhabitants, who might not have any compatible radio decoding technology, would see that it is a deliberate, non-random message. Drake composed a pictorial image with the help of Sagan. It is a message which is comprised of 1,679 binary digits. The number is significant, as it is a semi-prime number, meaning it is not only a prime number, but it is also the product of the multiplication of two prime numbers, in this case 23 and 73. By analysing the base data, it was assumed that an intelligent race would understand that the composition of this data was organised and not random, and should be able, without any prior knowledge of Earth or human language and our customs, be able to analyse and decode the intended message. As the Arecibo telescope is built within the Earth, it has limited ability to manoeuvre. So the message was broadcast out to whatever spot the telescope happened to be pointing towards, which happened to be that day the M13 star cluster. By the time the message actually gets to that part of space, which should be a cosmically short 25,000 Earth years, that particular cluster will have also moved. So technically, it will actually arrive near to the cluster. But that detail seems to be neither here nor there in the grand scheme of this project and of the subsequent events of our episode. The message itself was transmitted on the 16th of November 1974 at a frequency of 2,380 MHz, with regular shifts down and back by 10 MHz. These shifts represented the ones and zeros. To my mind, the thinking must have been to conjure up a kind of cosmic Morse code. It would have been seen or received as a string of 1,679 characters. And if the supposed alien recipients were as smart as we think they would have to be, they would have sussed that 1,679 is a semi-prime and set the information out in either a 73 by 25 grid, which would not make any sense, or a 23 by 73 grid, which should have revealed this. Which, if you pixelate and colour code, it now looks like this. The message is both simple but detailed, and was intended to relay basic information about the senders, i.e. us. At the top of the grid are the numbers 1 through 10 encoded within the binary code. Sagan and Drake didn't know for sure if aliens would understand binary code at the time, and there's still a chance this might have been a bad assumption. But as our understanding of the mathematical rules which govern the galaxy have increased over the last 5 decades, so too has the probability that it was actually a good assumption. The purpose, though, was to set out at the start of the message a primer, meaning if the supposed alien species could understand this initial part, then they had the tools and understanding to be able to read the rest of the message. The next set of rows is a pictogram which combines the numbers 1, 6, 7, 8 and 15. This series of numbers relates to the atomic numbers of hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen and phosphorus. These are the 5 base elements which make up human DNA. Just below this, the formulas for the bases and nucleotides of DNA is set out. Just below that again is an illustration of the 2 strands of a human DNA double helix, which includes a central plank which is there to represent the base pairs of nucleotides, which scientists of the 1970s believed to be 4.3 billion base pairs, but which we now know to be nearer 3.2 billion. Below this comes a graphical figure of an androgynous human, with the elements to the left there to give information on our average height. Again, the message authors could not convey this information in feet, inches, meters or centimeters, because we have no way of knowing how this will make sense to a species that potentially has no frame of reference to our systems of measurement. So instead, this was encoded as a wavelength unit, which again requires some assumptions of parallel thinking and understanding in a mathematical sense, but supposing those assumptions are sound, the message tells the recipients humans are 5 foot 9 inches in height. The information to the right is there to illustrate the population of the Earth, which was given as 4.29 billion. Next comes a pixelated view of our solar system, with the Sun to the left and then the 9 classified planets to the right. Pluto has since been relegated, but in theory, if the alien recipients flew by to check us out, they'd get the gist of what was being conveyed. Within this view, you will note that the third planet is slightly raised to show that it is us and this is where we live. Below this is a pixelated illustration of the Arecibo telescope, which officially was there to illustrate the type of technology used to broadcast the signal, but as this whole effort was primarily a marketing initiative, there was probably a call made to make sure it was represented in some way. An interesting point, one that is relevant to this episode, is that the message was originally created with the supposition that the coding would be set out in a grid format by reading left to right. Now, if the recipient were to read, or perhaps code from the right to the left, the message will still make sense, but the grid pattern looks like the mirror inverse view, such as this. As we have touched upon, ultimately, this was a bit of a thought exercise wrapped up in a promotional campaign. Something to both capture the imagination of the public and draw positive focus on the telescope and the work being done there. And with hindsight, I think most people would agree that those aims were met. As the signal will take such a long time to arrive close to the M13 star cluster, we'd be talking about a 50,000 year wait to get a reply from there. And by then you can imagine that we'd probably not be listening out for radio signals anymore. However, one possibility lingers. What if this message was to be intercepted en route? And that is what brings us back to the focus of today's episode. On the 21st of August 2001, 2 crop formations were discovered near the Chilbolton radio telescope in Hampshire, England. It is not clear how long these had been in the field, but some researchers believe that they were formed on the 20th of August or one day prior to their discovery. These were not your normal crop circle style formations and immediately caught the attention of ufologists, crop formation enthusiasts and the mainstream media. The 2 formations were approximately 200 metres apart in the same field. When viewed from the air, one formation resembled that of a human face. There has been much speculation in the intervening years if this is supposed to be a generic image of a human face or something else. Some people suggest it is the same face we see in that famous image from the surface of Mars, and others have suggested it is the face from the Egyptian Sphinx. The second formation was quickly recognised to look similar to the pictorial image sent out by the Arecibo team in 1974. However, it didn't take much analysis to see that it wasn't quite the same at all. This caused much excitement. I can personally recall waking late in the morning back in 2001 and seeing a BBC report on television. It was a report which stuck with me for a number of years, because I remember the reporter talking to people at the site and there being an excitement that, as the report stated, the formation seemed to be encoded in binary code. My mind wandered to the many scenarios of what the message was being relayed, and I wondered if we'd be able to understand it and if we would be able to reply. I felt excited by the prospect of first contact being an imminent possibility. I had no knowledge of the Drake-Sagan message at that time, nor of those esteemed gentlemen's work. I don't recall if either of them or the original message were mentioned as a part of that BBC coverage, though it may have been. The excitement faded as coverage of the formations didn't make it to the evening news cycle, and it seems few people I encountered in my then regular routine had heard the news or as excited as I was. I was 22 at the time of the initial news report, probably watching it with a hangover. I was a fan of The X-Files and of other movies and shows of that era that dealt with extraterrestrials. I recall seeing this report and thinking that it was cool. I hoped that we'd be able to open a friendly dialogue with aliens, and wondered if this was a pivotal moment in humanity's history. Just a few weeks later, the September 11 attacks happened, and the whole world seemed to change forever. All my youthful optimism seemed lost. Everything got serious, and the world felt like a dangerous, barbaric place. A place too uncivilized to have any serious aspirations of dealing with more advanced civilizations. Every now and then, in the intervening years, I would remember that news report and that glimmer of optimism I had felt that morning for something bigger and greater for humanity. It has been a bit of a mental dichotomy how these two very different news days, which occurred just a few weeks apart, have replayed in my mind over the years. Anyway, I have digressed. For those who eagerly attended the site and studied the Chilbolton crop formations, it was soon clear that the second formation was not a recreation of the Drake-Sagan message, but was instead a response. If we analyse it, we can see what information the message creator was attempting to convey. The message starts the same as the original, with the numbers 1 through 10. In the next section, there is an additional number inserted into the original sequence, that of the number 14, which indicates that the supposed transmitter is informing us they are not of human DNA, and that they have an additional element in their DNA equivalent makeup, that of silicone. In the section which follows, more changes were made to the nucleotide sequencing, and in where our message we had broadcast a double helix, the response shows a triple helix. In place of the humanoid we sent, we see a little character with a small body and a large head, which to many people seems to resemble what have become known as the Greys. The response also details a height of 3 foot 4 inches and a population size of 21 billion. The reply goes on to state that in their solar system they also have 9 planets, and that they inhabit the 3rd, 4th and 5th planets, with the 5th planet perhaps being the largest of the solar system, all of which seems to revolve around a smaller star than our own. In place of the Arecibo dish is a different pictogram, which was deemed to be a representation of the sender's broadcast technology, which by all accounts and stretches of the imagination seems to be an unknown technology that is likely far more advanced and complex than our own. 1 year prior to this, in 2000, in the very same field, a different crop formation had appeared. It has become linked to the formations of 1 year later, and many people see a correlation between this formation and the bottom section of the reply. A final observation is that if you look again at the crop formation picture, you can see that the reply seems to have been mirror reversed, or decoded and recorded as is read from right to left, rather than left to right. This suggests a couple of possibilities. The possible theorised aliens who created this are telling us that they do indeed read from right to left. This is not so uncommon. Most societies and religions to the east of Jerusalem here on Earth evolved their languages similarly. But an alternative observation is that we know the Drake-Sagan image got mirror imposed in some publications, as often happens with print pictures. And if the reply in the crops was made by human hoaxers, they may have worked to compose their reply from such a mirror image. Probably, however, they were sufficiently educated on the original enough to know this, and did so to add another layer of mystery. We need to now look at another incredible crop formation. 1 year later, on the 15th of August 2002, a little under 9 miles away in the town of Sparsholt, this new formation appeared. This formation also appeared very striking when viewed from the air, and those who had looked into the formation of 1 year prior suspected another message was encoded into the disk. They were correct. An 8-bit binary code known as ASCII, or American Standard Code for Information Exchange, had been used, and data can be read from the centre of the disk working outwards, much like how a DVD works. If the flat parts are taken as zeros and the blocks represent ones, then a simple message can be read. Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing. The OX07 at the end is thought to represent a sound like the dinging of a bell. Next to the image of the alien grey, you can just about detect 3 small shapes or dots. There are competing theories as to whether these are supposed to represent Orion's belt, which is one of the theorised home regions of the Zeta Reticulans, or whether these 3 dots were representative of the 3 inhabited planets detailed in the Chilbolton formation of a year prior. There was much about these formations which has prompted discussion over the intervening years. Will we ever be in contact with extraterrestrials? Will we contact them from Earth? Will they come to us? Will we need to be content to communicate electronically across great distances? If we ever do make first contact, by what form or language will we be able to speak to one another? Is it safe to broadcast messages into the galaxy? What if hostile aliens attack us? Are we alone in the universe? These are all very interesting questions, but in respect to this episode, we need to address the most pertinent question of them all. Were these formations made by aliens, or are they a hoax made by humans? Before I get to that, I just want to quickly address crop circles in general, because I must confess my own biased viewpoint on the subject. I have had an interest in the paranormal for a long time, and nobody gets to middle age with an interest of the paranormal without looking at crop circles at some point in their life. A few years ago, I deep dived into these, and it became clear to me, to my mind at least, that the vast majority, if not all, crop circles are man-made. I've watched many hours of videos purporting to decode elaborate patterns, and I've heard arguments that the stalks are bent in a way that seems inconsistent, if not impossible, with boards and ropes. But time and time again, after a period of wonderment, human people eventually come forward and confirm they had indeed made these formations. One theory purports that there is a technology used which flattens the stalks and is transmitted via a vortex or portal which opens above the earth. The crops are flattened, and people with intuition who have studied crop formations can later then decipher them and attribute them to events happening in the world. Only that's usually after those events have taken place. I hear more elaborate theories such as this, and I wonder, why, if a technologically superior and sophisticated civilization wishes to make contact with humanity, why do so through the medium of crop flattening? If they possess such advanced technology, why do they not speak to us by broadcasting on TV, radio, or the internet? Why not phone me or you on the devices we carry every day in our pockets? And so a number of years ago, despite being very open-minded to many aspects of paranormal research, I took the skeptical path with regards to crop formations. And although I do appreciate their intrinsic beauty, I do so more for the artistic quality and likely hard work that would have gone into their design and creation. Though as a country lad, I also feel bad for the loss of crops and for the difficulties that this must present to the farmers. I do not know why there are people out there who enjoy making crop circles. It seems like an odd pastime to me, but undoubtedly they exist, though they do seem to be a fairly secretive bunch. It is also evident to a non-crop circle expert such as myself that the quality and intricacy of these formations has evolved over time. They are undoubtedly getting more complex and intricate, with the neatness and precision also improving over time. This seems to me to be entirely consistent with human repetition, competition, and evolution. We tend to get better at things the more we do them. Finally, despite what some people have claimed, there has never been a clear and precise message delivered via crop formations, at least one that we can get a general consensus on beyond the most ardent enthusiasts. This rules out the notion that these are coherent communications or warnings of some kind. Except, of course, for the situation in hand, which presents as the exception to the rule, and which is why it's the focus of today's episode and worthy of our time. In all those years since they caught my attention and imagination, they were the exception, as these formations are the more advanced, more sophisticated, and more specific crop formation. They stand out, and in many ways are incomparable to all other formations before and since. However, in researching this event in 2020, I found the Crop Circle Wisdom website, where I found a page from June 2019 which finally explains what lie behind this mystery. A little over a week before the article I was reading was published on the Crop Circle Wisdom site, a researcher, Colin Andrews, who is unconnected with that site, published a statement on his social media. In that statement, Colin asserts that the 2002 alien holding disc formation was in fact a promotional stunt by a major Hollywood studio aimed at the promotion of a very well-known movie released in the summer of 2002. The UK release was less than 1 month following, in September 2002. Colin himself was consulting on that movie in an uncredited role, and in his post names both the movie and the studio. The Crop Circle's Wisdom site followed up on this statement and, using some of the information from Colin's statement, sought to find the specific crop makers, which the author of that post did. He then named in that post the specific group with a link to their website and concluded that they too were responsible for the crop formations from the year prior. This group are specialists in creating land art, including crop formations, and at the time of my research, I was able to find some breadcrumbs for myself around the internet which supported this assertion. In the process of making an episode on this channel, I would usually do 3 things. I would post a link to the Crop Circle Wisdom site, one to Colin's social media post, and one to the website of the creators. However, in the intervening months since researching and scripting this episode, things seem to have changed. The Crop Circle Wisdom site is no more. Well, it's there, but the original content is gone, and I suspect the owner did not renew their ownership with WordPress, so the site has been repurposed. I'll drop a link in the description, but it's pretty much useless now. Colin has also moved his social media posts to private, so the original content is now only shared with people Colin wishes to share it with. However, the comment thread remains open, and within that thread, the full name of one of the creators is mentioned, and close by, the first name of his partner is also still referenced. I don't know Colin, and I don't know why he moved the post to private, but I do have a screen grab of the post from before it was hidden. From the comment thread, Colin makes reference to an out-of-court settlement with the studio in relation to the use of his materials in the film, and so I suspect he has done so to avoid any further legal run-ins, as this studio is notoriously litigious. I am in two minds whether to link to that social media post still, but I'm going to not do so, at least not at the time of publication of this video. It seems to be Colin's professional page, but in places the comments are somewhat emotive, which I understand, and I'll get to that in a bit. I know this channel does not have a massive reach, but I don't know what the future holds and how others are going to react to this, and I don't want to be any part of any potential piling on or doxing, and I wish to avoid even the appearance of such. So I'm going to err on the side of caution and not link to that post. I hope I have built up sufficient credibility with my subscribers that you will take my word for it, but if not, and you decide to go down this particular rabbit hole for yourselves, then please do so in your own name. It is clear from the limited comments and correspondence I have seen attached to those original posts that even when individuals are named, and you can go see it for yourself fairly plainly, some people still don't wish to believe that these formations are man-made, which is a shame. So, to summarise, based on my research, it is now my firm conclusion that the formations we discussed in this episode are entirely man-made. The formations were commissioned by a US movie studio for the purpose of generating interest in crop formations around the same time they released their movie. They were created by a UK-based group, and the exercise was a hoax intended to dupe people and ultimately to maximise revenue. To the best of my knowledge, the people who actually created the formations have not themselves publicly and explicitly confirmed their involvement. As such, that leaves me with the quandary of whether to name them and their group here, and I'll address that in a few moments. There are three lines of thought I am left with in reflecting on this. Firstly, some might say that it was a worthwhile and enjoyable hoax, one that served its purpose well, and that also would have sparked 1,000 debates in pubs up and down the land, and probably further afield. It sparked debates on topics of great importance around first contact, and of the origins of crop formations more generally. The alleged motivations for the hoaxing also explains why mainstream media organisations did cover these formations at the time, as in the UK, individual crop formations are not generally considered newsworthy, so some media complicity must have been involved. The formations did prompt some fascinating questions in my own mind over the years, and made me consider concepts about extraterrestrials that I may not have done without. However, this is perhaps a generous interpretation of the events. The second line of thinking is to feel upset about the whole situation. This, after all, was an outright hoax, and one that was perpetrated to fool people and generate revenue. People dedicated money and time to research those formations. They did so in good faith and with enthusiasm, and then unwittingly helped fuel the conversations and controversy that it seems this international corporation was seeking, so as associate it to their film. There were TV shows with people proffering their observations, And in retrospect, those people who were duped can and will, in the cold light of day, be rightly angry and embarrassed to have been drawn into the episode and for having believed that these communications were from an off-world intelligence. Some people might not feel inclined to feel bad for such people, and might dismiss them as not being smart enough to see through the ruse, to which I would point out, it makes the whole situation no less contrived nor mean-spirited. And the third line of thought I have on this is to really appreciate the lengths to which some people and companies will go to perpetrate a hoax if it suits their own purposes. Forevermore, we will have the perfect example in which to point towards and to hold in our minds as the proof of the lengths some people will go to in this world that we share to deceive others for personal gain. We must stay forever vigilant in the pursuit of truth in our own paths of discovery, in the examination of paranormal activities, and be permanently aware that there is always someone out there who will delight in ridiculing and maybe even profiting from fooling our community. It also leaves me wondering what other well-known cases that received much publicity in the news media might have also had powerful corporations sponsoring the coverage. And who knows which executives were revelling and how much extra revenues were derived from such deceptions. I was left with the quandary of whether to name the individuals and the group, which, although this was already done in the aforementioned sites and posts, and may well have been done elsewhere, I don't think I will. I do not have much internet influence, but I do not want to give them even a mite's pittance worth of publicity. I am personally content to put this episode to bed and consider the case closed. Down the line, others might want to make more noise about this and decide to name them. That will be for them. Given that bigger and more influential names in this space already have done so, seems to have not stirred up much fuss. But I would rather ensure that I don't need to devote any more time to them or this subject, and now wish to re-engage my focus on matters of the paranormal which do truly defy interpretation. No matter what your view might be in any of these regards, perhaps it is best for me to end it there. If you have enjoyed this episode, please click the thumbs up button and leave a comment down below. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. I've also recently joined Instagram, so if you're on there too, please consider giving me a follow. As always, all that's left for me to say is, thanks very much for watching.